In this video, we'll be covering topics from our Algebra 1 Topic 1 material. These will help you prepare for the test and go along with your paper copy of the test review if you received one. Let's first look at Lesson 1-2. Here you are asked to be able to create an equation. Generally, you're given some sort of story problem with information and asked to create an equation that will help you solve it and find the answer. A few hints might be, pick out the numbers. Look for numbers that they've given you and note that you'll likely use most of them in your equation. Also, create or use the variable they're giving you. Finally, look for keywords to know which math symbols you might use. Words like sum or difference or total. Whenever you have those words, they can help you know which to choose and create your equation. Go ahead and try creating equations for these two problems. Now in this same lesson, you are asked to create equations. Of course, it's helpful to be able to solve them. It might be important to remember that not everybody needs to create an equation to figure out the answers to these story problems, and that's okay. That can still give you partial credit. But when we have to solve an equation, sometimes it doesn't have a story to go along with it. Remember, your goal is to always get one variable all by itself, and that oftentimes is done by canceling out what has been done. So if you see a subtract by 5, you're going to add a 5. Or if we have times an 8, you're going to divide by 8. Remember, it's about canceling out what is near the variable in order to get that variable all alone on one side of the equation. Go ahead and give these a few tries. In Lesson 1-3, you are asked to be able to solve an equation with variables on both sides. Again, we're still solving equations, and you want to get your variable all alone, but generally you have x's and numbers on both sides of the equations. The goal is to simplify each side if possible. If there's anything you can do first on one side of the equal sign, do that to reduce the number of steps. Then get all your variables on one side and then all your number terms on the other side. You'll do this by canceling out the operation that you see. So example, if you have a -3, you would be adding 3 to cancel that out. Once you're done, you want to get x all alone. Remember, you could always check your answer by substituting it back in for the variable you solved for and see if the equation is true. Try a couple of these ones. In Lesson 1-4, we solved equations for a variable. Now these felt a little weird because you weren't actually solving for a number. We again are using these inverse or opposite operations to get a letter all alone. So when you're asked to solve for the variable x, you're moving things to the other side that are not the x by the opposite operation. You're asked to get one variable all alone that is not currently alone. Practice a couple of these. You're also asked to create an inequality in our Lesson 1-5. This is very similar to creating an equation like you were asked in 1-2. Pick out the numbers that you see in the story problem. Also, define a variable. Generally, it's what they're asking about. And finally, look at keywords to know which math symbols you might use. Things like totals, sum, difference. The only difference here than creating an equation is you'll have an inequality. You're going to say that they want more than a certain amount, or less than a certain amount, or less than or equal to something. So you will generally have that as your symbol, one of these, instead of an equal sign. Once we create the inequality, we ask you to solve that to help you know what might be a set of solutions. Remember the difference between an inequality and an equation. In an equation, you only have one answer. With an inequality, there's a span of answers. We still want to do the same thing like when we solved our equations. We want to simplify each side of the inequality. So sometimes that means doing the distribution property, and sometimes that means combining like terms. Then, again, you will get all your variables on one side and your numbers on the other. The important difference also with inequalities is if you have to divide by a negative number. Say, for example, -5x is less than or equal to 10. If you divide by that negative on both sides, that will flip your inequality. A negative divided by a negative will cancel out and leave our x. Our inequality flips and we have -2. That's the biggest difference from solving inequality in equations. In Lesson 1-6, you are asked to create or look at compound inequalities. This just means you have multiple of them. A few things to note about notation. Remember, if you have the closed circle, it would indicate an equals to bar underneath your inequalities. If you have an open circle, that means that number is not included, so you would have a less than or a greater than. Always want to check the circle types to know which filled circle or open circle you need depending on your inequality, and check the shading directions. So if we say x is greater than 5, or x is less than or equal to -2, you have two separate shadings you'll have to do and graph it on the number line. Sometimes you'll be asked, if you're given a number line, to create the inequalities. With these ideas in mind, be sure to give your Topic 1 test review a try and check the answer key to find these answers for each of these problems.